In this lesson, I'll be talking about physical quantities, units, and dimensions. This is part A. This lesson is going to be in parts A, B, C, D, and probably E. It is broken down in bits to aid understanding. In this part A, I will talk about fundamental quantities and what they are. All right, as a way of beginning, the goals for our learning goals here is to be able to list the fundamental quantities or the basic quantities with their respective SI units. I will also talk about the SI units, the SI system of units in the course of this lesson, maybe in the subsequent videos, if not in this video, right? And then being able to correctly write and specify the symbols for fundamental units. And then finally, being able to list some derived quantities with their respective formulas. And also being able to know how to derive the units for the derived quantities, that is, obtaining the derived units for derived quantities. So these goals are spread across all the parts A, B, C, D, and maybe E, as the case may be. So do well to subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification button, also hit the like button so that um, whenever subsequent videos are updated, you can get alerted to follow through. Okay, as a way of introduction, in physics, we deal with physical quantities. When we say physical quantities, what are we talking about? Examples include mass, time, velocity, pressure, volume, force, acceleration, etc. So there are a whole lot of physical quantities, over 20, 30, thereabouts, even more. But these are just but few examples of what physical quantities are. And then all the physical quantities that we have can be generally grouped into two. Namely, that is, what I mean is that the physical quantities can fall into any of the following groups. Okay, the first group is the fundamental quantities, and then the second group is the derived quantities. So any physical quantity you come across is either a fundamental quantity or a derived quantity. All right, another important thing to note is that physical quantities are measured based on some predetermined standards. And these standards are referred to as units. So what I'm saying here is that we try to measure physical quantities, and then the measurement is not just done arbitrarily. The measurements are done based on some predetermined standards, and these standards are referred to as units. Two things actually characterize the measurement of physical quantities. The first one is the magnitude, and then the second one is the units. By the time the magnitude talks about how big the size of a quantity is. Take, for example, if I say 1000. Now, you don't know, without attaching a unit, you don't know whether I'm talking about mass or time or velocity or maybe pressure or, you know. So, but by the time I now attach a unit, take, for example, I said 1000 Newton, that unit now gives you an idea of the quantity I'm measuring and the standard with which I am measuring that quantity. So, this is why units are very, very, very important in dealing with physical quantities. In physics, generally, units are very important. Okay, another thing to note is that in as much as units are standards for measurements for physical quantities, many physical quantities have units, while there are some that do not have units. So it's not all physical quantities that have units. The ones that don't have units are referred to as dimensionless quantities. I will talk about this in a later lesson. Okay, and a quick comment here. The group of quantities that don't have units, some there are few anyway, not much, but those ones fall under derived quantities, as we are going to be seeing subsequently. Okay, so fundamental quantities, what are they? These are the basic quantities that are independent and cannot be defined in terms of other physical quantities or derived from them. They are the basic quantities upon which most other quantities depend. Now, what does this mean? Fundamental quantities are, first of all, they are independent. This means that they exist on their own. They are not gotten from any other quantity. And then secondly, they are the basic quantities upon which most other quantities depend. So this implies that they are the building blocks. The fundamental quantities are the building blocks for several other quantities that we have, which are now referred to as what? Derived quantities. Okay, there are about seven of them that we're going to be seeing. About seven of them. The first one is length. Then we have mass. We have time. We have thermodynamic temperature, or you can simply refer to that as temperature. Of course, they don't need to come in this order, all right? I can decide to mention time first. I can say time, temperature, mass, length. So it's not necessarily in this order. It can come in any order. Okay, then we have luminous intensity, we have amount of substance, and then we have electric current. So these are seven fundamental quantities that are the building blocks for several other quantities that we have in physics. They are referred to as fundamental because you don't derive these quantities. They exist as the basic, as the foundation to several other quantities. Okay, and then another thing to note is that all fundamental quantities have their units and they are referred to as fundamental units. You know, in the previous slide, I mentioned that some physical quantities don't have units. Okay, those few physical quantities that don't have units, they don't fall under fundamental quantities. Those one come under some derived quantities that don't have units. And the reason for that we are going to see as we continue to go through this lesson. So, but for the fundamental quantities, all fundamental quantities have their units. And then the units of these fundamental quantities are referred to as fundamental units. Okay, so this brings us to the end of part A. In part B, we are going to continue from here. All right. Do well to subscribe, then hit the like button, and also turn on the notification button so that you can get updated when the next lesson is updated. Thank you very much.